Okay, so we'll get started now. Good morning, India, and good afternoon, Australia. A very warm welcome from us here in Australia. I'm Dipan Rugani. I'm the CEO of Newland Global Group, and we've organized this webinar today. The theme of this webinar is Australia, India opportunities, pharmaceutical and biotechnology sectors. We're proud to have partnered in this event with the Government of India Consulate of Sydney, the Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance, and the Association of Biotech-led Enterprises. In this webinar, we will identify the DNA of successful partnerships in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology sectors, how the disruptions brought by technology and globalization has led companies to coordinate basic research to how they choose their suppliers and distributors, bring more efficiency and responsiveness through licensing agreements. To survive in the changed global reality, what it takes to create a better, a more integrated way of working together, involving a close sharing of skills, infrastructure, financial resources, and exclusive knowledge between both of these sectors, and our hope to identify synergies between Australia and India in these sectors. Let's get started. I would like to invite the Consul General of India, Mr. Manish Gupta, for his introductory remarks. Mr. Manish Gupta is a career diplomat and a member of the Indian Foreign Services since 1998. During a diplomatic career spanning over 20 years, he has held various positions in New Delhi and abroad and has extensive experience in dealing with multilateral issues. Mr. Gupta, over to you.
Thank you very much, Deepan. Good afternoon, friends in Australia. Good morning to our friends in India. Indeed, it's a privilege for me to join everyone today. Thanks to the Newland Global Group, we are able to bring our partners from India, the Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance, the Alliance for Association of Biotech-led Enterprises, and Cicero from Australia on a common platform. As you all know, our India-Australia relations are multifaceted. It's a very diversified relationship comprising the entire gamut of sectors that we could ever imagine. The virtual summit between the two prime ministers in June opened a new vistas of opportunities. Our partnership was upgraded to a comprehensive strategic partnership. It's a privileged relationship, and as the word comprehensive would indicate, that could encompass all sectors of our activities. And certainly, pharma and biotech, to me, these are the sunrise sectors for this relationship, because we have huge complementarities between capacities of India and Australia. When we talk about the pharma and biotech sector, I think there is a big churning in these sectors during the last 2 decades. And what we have also seen, a solid era of interdependence that has come between the pharma and biotech industries. In India, in our major centers between Bengaluru and Hyderabad, we see the emergence of a biotech cluster. When it comes to pharmaceutical industry in India, it has been very well established. In fact, over 500 US FDA approved manufacturing facilities, the largest outside the United States, are in India only. Our pharmaceutical strengths, especially for the generics, are well known around the world. We export generic medicines to over 200 countries. But what is more important is to realize what India provides is high quality medicines at very low costs. And that's the success mantra for our pharmaceutical industry. What is more, we are seeing, the developments that's happening in India, where Indian pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies are scaling up in the value chain. The latest COVID pandemic, as would suggest, once again emphasizes what we need is more cooperation and collaboration rather than cutthroat competition. Perhaps that's the best way to produce highly cost-effective medicines in a very time efficient manner. In India, various vaccines are undergoing trial by different companies, whether it is Covaxin from Bharat Biotech or the DRL group experimenting with the Russian vaccine, or the Serum Institute experimenting the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine trials. So different trials. These are 2 or 3 examples I have quoted, but I know whether it's Panacea Biotech or other companies also. And in fact, there's one collaboration with Australia also with the Griffiths University that is also underway. So we are, amidst this pandemic, working closely to provide the vaccines in a very cost efficient and fast manner globally, not only for India, but rest of the world also. As vaccine producers, India's capacities, we produce only more than half of the global vaccines in India. So we are confident that when it comes to scaling up, we will be able to do it up pretty quickly. But when it comes to Australia, you know, Australia, research and innovation, we do here really at a cutting edge. The universities, Cicero, they do a commendable work. But what the limited challenge here I see is because of the limited size of the market, commercialization of these technologies and scaling up is always not a very cost-effective way. And that's where I think India can have a big role to play. Our economic framework, regulatory framework is very, very supportive of foreign investments. In fact, in greenfield investments in the pharma sector, it's 100% of the automatic route. And if it comes to brownfield investments, up to 74% is already permitted under the automotive route. And when it comes to clinical trial and contract manufacturing also, many of the Australian companies will find India a very attractive destination. In fact, I know the George Institute of Global Health, they have their operations in India, and there are a few other companies also who are experimenting with India in a limited way. And Australia would also stands to gain, you know, once the TGA further liberalizes the acceptance of the generic medicines in this country. In US, you know, generics almost constitute 40% of the market, but in Australia, the share is less than 20%. So that's a big opportunity that we look forward to. And lastly, one more sector that I would like to identify is the alternative medicines. In Australia, alternate medicines have a good acceptance. To my Indian and Australian friends, I would like to suggest Australia could be a good place for certification of the Ayurvedic medicines, and this is something we should look after. Because alternate medicines can't entirely be clubbed as a separate category when we talk about COVID and all. When it comes to immunity boosting and other procedures, probably Ayurveda, you know, has already a lot of good history, a solid ground of medicines that could be worked together. So I look forward to a very constructive deliberations, your suggestions for collaborations, your suggestions for further expanding our opportunities. We welcome all that. And we look forward to building upon this engagement further. I thank everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Our next speaker is Mr. Sudarshan Jain, who's the Secretary General of the Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance. The IPA represents research-based national pharmaceutical companies. Collectively, IPA accounts for over 85% of the private sector investments in pharmaceutical research and development, contributes more than 80% of the country's exports of drugs and pharmaceuticals, and service over 57%, and services over 50% of the Indian domestic market. Mr. Jain was earlier the Managing Director at Abbott Healthcare Solutions. He has a rich healthcare business experience of over 40 years, which includes stints with Abbott, Johnson & Johnson, and leading Indian companies. Mr. Jain has also served as Vice President of the Organization of Pharmaceutical Producers of India, representing research-based pharmaceutical companies. Mr. Jain, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dipen, and thank you very much for inviting us for this seminar. I would like to thank also Mr. Manish Gupta and all outstanding members of the panel here We have got a great panel which will set the direction going forward. I'll build on what Mr. Manish Gupta talked about, that India is the pharmacy of the world. Indian industry is not only a threat to India, but to the world, as our Prime Minister called it. And also cooperation and collaboration is fundamental going forward. Just to talk about some of the highlights of the Indian industry, we supply 60% of vaccine production around the world. We supply 60% of antiviral drugs from India. Every third tablet in US is sold from India. Every fourth tablet in Europe is sold from India. And we have made difference to the affordable healthcare around the world. In fact, every year we bring saving of $83 billion to US economy in terms of healthcare expenses. And as Mr. Manish Gupta rightly said, India can play a pivotal role going forward, even to the Australian economy, as far as access of healthcare is concerned. It is a great time today as far as Australia-India bilateral relationship is concerned. Our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi and Mr. Patterson played a very important role. They had a great meeting. And this is a very good time. And one of the very exciting sector is the healthcare sector, where both companies can work together with its definite complementary strengths. And I will elaborate on some of the areas how both the companies can work together going forward. And IPA with top companies in India. We have got 25 members as far as IPA companies are concerned. Some of them have got a strong presence in India, like Cipla, Sun, Dr. Reddy's. They are operating very strongly as far as Australian market is concerned. And how do we further build on this relationship, which I will like to talk about. First is COVID exposed to us what is the strength of the Indian pharma industry. And despite the stringent lockdown which prevailed in this country, we have been able to supply medicines to more than 205 countries. There was demand shock, there was supply shock, but Indian government worked together with the industry and made sure that the pharma products are available. In fact, pharmaceutical industry was declared as an essential industry. So even during a very tough time, we have been able to meet the global requirement of medicine. So what we can say at this particular moment, I've got the advantage of August gathering here and the advantage of Mr. Manish Gupta here. Everywhere in the world, and I keep on saying, there is nowhere in the world where we have not been able to supply the world at this particular moment of time. And we are proud of the Indian industry. We are proud of all people who are involved in the distribution, selling of the drugs, that no person has been impacted by shortage of drug, and thanks to the contribution of Indian industry. So one very important point as far as Indian industry is concerned, India is a dependable supplier of medicine in the world. I will give the example, paracetamol. For some period of time, we had import restrictions, but our PM and our government said that the global supply is important. So even in a very tough situation, we have been able to meet the global requirement. Point number one. Point number two is Indian industry at the moment is $41 billion industry. $21 billion is exports and around $20 billion is domestic market. This industry is likely to be $140 billion and will record around double-digit growth in next 10 years. At the moment, we are in the branded generic business, but the industry will keep on upgrading itself to complex generic biologicals, and we can make difference to the Australian market by supplying these products from India. And also getting into cooperation with the Australian government, that both the companies, both the countries and the centers can work together to upgrade to complex generics and also development products, R&D products, what we are talking. Many of the companies are increasing their research, and we are sure that next 5 to 6 years, we will be launching 1 or 2 new chemical entities. So there will be a tremendous opportunity as far as R&D efforts are concerned. In India and Australia can work together as far as that direction is concerned. So there will be opportunities for complex generics, there will be opportunities for incremental innovation, there will be opportunities for new chemical entities. And there are huge opportunities between both the companies coming together and taking the agenda forward. So that is the second area which is there. Third area which is very, very important is the repurposed drug. where India has played a very important role. So if you see any repurposed drug, whether it is remdesivir, whether it is dexamethasone, whether it is ivermectin, or whether it is vaccines, India is at the center stage. India, in fact, remdesivir, when it is not being supplied from US and other parts of the world, Indian companies are supplying to more than 150 countries. In fact, Indian companies have entered into voluntary agreements with Gilead, and we are supplying. There are 6 brands of remdesivir which are available in India, and Dr. Reddy's, they are supplying remdesivir to more than 150 countries. So whether it is remdesivir, whether it is ivermectin, whether it is hydroxychloroquine, India is going to play an important role. And even in vaccine, we have got 60% of vaccine production in the world. So whichever vaccine comes in the world, India will continue to play a very important role. And India and Australia can work together, that we can supply to Australia, we can supply to other parts of the world from Australia. And here Dr. Vasan is doing a lot of work in vaccine. We can work together, and there will be certain areas of collaboration. So that is the third area which I wanted to emphasize as far as repurposed drug is concerned. India has also announced recently API policy. In fact, we are talking of clusters in different parts of the country where there will be one place shop for approvals, project management, environmental clearance, and India will be the supplier of APIs. And we are building our strength. At the moment, there is a reliance of API from other parts of the world, but we want to get back our dominance as far as API is concerned. Again, India and Australia can invest in the greenfield facilities as far as India is concerned. It is a great opportunity for Australia to invest as far as that area is concerned. So there is a great opportunity in API, key starting material. India and Australia can work together as far as that area is concerned. The other point which I like to highlight, Indian students come to Australia, and perhaps if I remember clearly, we must be the largest supplier of students from India. So there is already a great system which has been built up. India has also announced a new education policy, which has just come in. So there can be exchange of students, there can be exchange of scientists, there can be exchange of research which is being done in both the countries. And Australia and India can be a great collaboration in the education system, perhaps in the field of pharmacy education, because we have got NIPERs in the country, and we are looking forward for upgrading the courses as far as India is concerned, upgrading the systems of education which is concerned. So there can be exchange programs between India and Australia, and that can be a great foundation for building as far as the life science sector is concerned. I'm seeing tremendous opportunity going forward. In fact, the healthcare destination for the future will be India. India has got demographic advantage with our population median age 24, 25 years, and that can be a great building block as far as going forward is concerned. 2 areas: education, exchange of education, exchange of intellectual property, exchange of knowledge, and second area is digital technology. India and Australia can play a very, very important role together. Artificial intelligence, we had a big conference in India the other day where Prime Minister himself was saying, in fact, we should be the AI capital of the world. And AI will play a very important role in drug discovery, research, and India and Australia can work together. Just to conclude here, as far as I'm concerned, IPA is playing a very important role as far as India is concerned. We are playing a role with the government of India to upgrade the branded medicine sector as far as Indian is concerned. Future going forward, it is an ideal time for Australia and India to work together. We have got great bilateral relationship. We should build on it. And healthcare sector, life science sector, pharmacy sector is the most exciting sector going forward. I wish all the very best. And once again, thank you, Newland Global Group and Dipen and Natasha for inviting us. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. It was a very enlightening presentation. Just for our audience and people here, there is a question and answer session at the end of this. So if you have any questions, please, by all means, at the bottom of the screen, you have a Q&A button, ask some questions. Our next speaker is Mr. Sri Kumar Suryanarayan, who is the president of the Association of Bio-led Enterprises, ABLE. ABLE is a not-for-profit pan-India forum that represents the Indian biotechnology sector and has over 400 members representing all verticals, including agri-biotech, biopharma, industrial biotech, bioinformatics, investment banks, and venture capital firms, leading research and academic institutions, law firms, and equipment suppliers. Mr. Suryanarayan is the chairman and co-founder of C6 Energy PVT Limited. He was formerly the president of research and development at Biocon Limited, India, and the chief scientific advisor to the company. He is also a member of governing and advisory boards of several institutes and the centers that are promoted by the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India. Shri, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's my pleasure to actually be at the seminar. So if you can see my screen right now, I presume I'll put it on. Yep. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So what I will attempt to do in the next 10 minutes is to basically run you through the current status of the Indian biotechnology industry. And so we have more than 600 plus core biotech companies in India. And, you know, Mr. Jain, Sudarshan Jain has given you an overview of the strength of the Indian pharmaceutical industry. And biotech is more biology oriented. So we really would like to, I'll try and supplement that part. Over 3,300 biotech startups and over 800 biotechnology products available in the country. There's been a huge thrust by government. So there's many biotechnology incubators, and as the COVID situation has shown, this has paid off big time, and I will just spend a minute or two more to talk about that. India is one of the few countries that actually invested in the Department of Biotechnology, focused many years ago, more than 20 years ago, and that is paying off now. The Indian bioeconomy last year itself was worth about $62.5 billion. And as you can see, it's been growing, and it was 51 billion in 2018. Then it went to 62.5 billion last year. And ABLE actually compiles these figures in collaboration with the Department of Biotechnology. We expect that, and our target is that it will be $100 billion by 2025. Much of this growth is going to be driven by startups. And as you can see, and biotech startups, which is the way it has been, a lot of innovation. So while India has established a very strong base in the generic pharmaceutical industries, what you're going to see is the future growth will come from a lot of innovation with these startups will fuel. Roughly, you can see the number of startups has practically doubled in the last 3 years. In 2017, it was about 1,700 startups, and it's more than 3,300 startups when we looked at it in 2019. And the way these startups are split up are roughly, without a doubt, the majority of them, as you can see in this a majority of them, out of the 3,300, more than 2,000 are in the biopharma, biomedical diagnostics sector. But the other two big sectors which biotechnology spans, as you know, biotechnology is not just focused on healthcare, but also food security and agriculture, as well as sustainability. And I will spend a little bit of time to give you an overview of this. So as you can see, the big sectors are not just biopharma, but bioagri and, also very interestingly, contract research services focused on bioresearch. And that reflects roughly the breakup of the industry today. So about roughly 60% in biopharmaceutical, about 16% in bioresearch services, contract research services. For example, this is very key in drug discovery and in medicine. So if you want GMP manufacture of a innovative new pharmaceutical product, you want some complex chemistry done, or you want some mechanism of action revealed in discovery services. There are many companies in India which have established world-class reputations. And I think given the changing geopolitical situations, this is a very great opportunity for a IP-based economy like Australia to actually amplify and accelerate a collaboration with India. As you can see, there is also a large thrust on agri. Well, I'd like to take a little bit more. Everybody's talking about COVID, and obviously COVID is very important. But what this actually tells you how India emerged. Now, of course, both the Honorable Consul General Manish and Mr. Sudarshan, as well as Deepen, talked about vaccines. But you see, the story is not just limited to vaccines. Of course, let me give you a little depth. India is indeed the largest producer of supplier of vaccines today. Almost every major vaccine in development is actually reflected in a partnership in India. So whether it's the Serum Institute looking at the Oxford vaccine, or it will be Bharat Biotech or many other companies, India can make and supply the world's vaccines requirement today, okay? But it's not just limited to vaccines. A new CRISPR-based diagnostic, and if you recall, CRISPR won the Nobel Prize just now, was actually developed. It's a very fast test, and it's a paper-based test. It was developed by the IGIB, Institute for Genomics and Integrative Biology, and now it's been marketed by the Tata. Extremely high specificity, extremely high reproducibility, and it's very interesting. So this could transform what it might mean to be with COVID going forward. So you can have a test result in less than 15, 20 minutes. And it's not just diagnostic, innovative new therapeutics. For example, there was a recent monoclonal antibody, itolizumab, which was launched by Biocon, another able member, which can really overcome the cytokine storm that so permeates COVID. So whether it's vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics, India is really making a mark. So now let me just quickly switch to what India can offer to Australia. Basically, I mean, these are obvious. India is a very large market, $3 trillion market, one of the world's largest growing economies, and an aspiring middle class. Expected to recover to an 8+% growth next year after the COVID. That's a IMF report. And collaborations with, so what we can offer is collaborations, whether it's contract research services, biotech startups, accelerating clinical trials. For example, if there's a new drug that's being developed, IP-based drug, which say somebody in Australia is developing, if you want to accelerate your clinical trials. Why? Because any drug requires recruitment. You have to recruit a large number of patients that meet a certain criteria. Simply given the demographics of India, the large population, recruitment proceeds much faster because there are many more instances of the people who can qualify the strict criteria for the drugs. Therefore, clinical trial timelines are dramatically reduced, and therefore the costs. Now, we've all focused on healthcare. It is definitely the biggest opportunity, but there are opportunities to build a sustainable bioeconomy, a growing market for wellness products. And in return, it's not just pharmaceuticals, but we, as the Consul General explained, we can look at nutritional well-being products, as well as high-quality food products, leather products. There's so many other opportunities. But more importantly, when you look at a long-term perspective, compared to other opportunities in front of Australia, there are common bonds in India with the English language and cricket, okay, for people who play cricket. There is similar rule of law and similar legal systems, and a shared vision in terms of democratic norms. And the United States have come together in a Quad security arrangement. I apologize if my internet is a little unstable, but what is even more important is because the language and the transparency and the large diaspora that we have in Australia, it's very easy for people in Australia to find people that they can relate to, say, hey, do you really know how it works? And sometimes, there are peculiarities in the system, but it's complete transparency. I mean, that for sure. And all the openness and chaos that democracy brings, But on top of that, as we have seen, there are many existing collaborations already. So there's a large commonality, objectives, and linkages. So let's briefly then discuss a few opportunities. Healthcare we have covered, and it's not just human healthcare. There is opportunities for animal healthcare, vaccines, taking vaccines forward to manufacturing, many opportunities in healthcare. And I think this is without a doubt going to be one of the largest areas. But there are opportunities, other biotechnology opportunities, marine biotechnology. Take an example of fisheries technology. India is one of the largest exporters of shrimp and is looking to add value to this sector. And I think there is a lot of know-how and opportunities that can be translated into India from Australia. Recirculatory aquaculture systems, finfish aquaculture, oyster and crab hatcheries, seaweed agriculture, so many possibilities. So these are some things that go beyond just pharmaceuticals. There are opportunities in dairy technologies, without a doubt. India is the largest milk producer, but we may not be the most efficient. And what we need is better nutrition, management skills, breeding, fertility, disease management, understanding of dairy cattle genetics, and it's a large market. So I think there is plenty of stuff that Australia can do for India here in return. There are opportunities in sustainable environment and water use. And without a doubt, when you talk about sustainability and water use, biotechnology is one of the largest opportunities, whether it's cleanup of recycle waste management, reduction of carbon dioxide emissions, whether it's a Ganga river cleaning project where we're looking to collaborate all across the world, whether it's a smart cities initiative where we need to recycle and reuse water, big opportunities for biotechnology. So that gives you a snapshot, and I'll just spend a minute on who we are as Enable. It's a non-profit organization. We represent the Indian biotechnology sector. It's a think tank. We work closely with many leading biopharmaceutical companies are members of ABLE. We work with state governments, national government of India. We encourage entrepreneurship. We showcase India internationally. We take up regulatory issues affecting the industry, which will hold industry back. So that's all the stuff we do. And what is our vision? We want India to be a thriving bioeconomy, $100 billion. So whatever that needs to be done, including making collaborations happen with Australia, we're more than happy to encourage that. What we want is 10 million jobs in the bioeconomy, which value-added structure, with value addition. We want to be globally recognized as a biological medicines provider of the highest quality, provider of high value medical treatments. The Consul General, he referred to the India being a healthcare destination, including gene therapy and stem cell therapy. Some really innovative stem cell therapies have already made it to the market. Grower of high-tech agricultural products. We are a large population. We need the most efficient agriculture. Any new technology is welcome. Home to environmentally sustainable products and technology. So that's really what ABLE is all about. More than happy to encourage linkages. And with that, I just basically have come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sri. Appreciate that. We're receiving some questions. I request our audience to continue asking questions. We will have some questions at the end of this session. Our next speaker is Professor S.S. Vasan, a public health expert. He holds an honorary chair in the Department of Health and Sciences. He leads the CSIRO Dangerous Pathogens team at the Australian Animal Health Laboratory. And Professor Vasan is leading Australia's SARS and CoV-2 virus work and the preclinical trials testing for COVID-19 vaccine candidates. Over to you, Professor Vasan.
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes. You see my screen, my PowerPoint.
Perfect. We can see that.
Namaskar. I'm Vasan. So I lead the COVID-19 projects, which are funded by CEPI, the Global Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, at the CSIRO. So at the bottom, I've shown what CSIRO is. It's Australia's national science agency. Think of India's CSIR laboratories, ICMR, Indian Council for Agricultural Research, and ISRO, put everything together. So that's sort of a single national science agency. I will be talking a bit about COVID because I do want to show you the depth of science that we do here. And it's a nice case study and a segue into what we can talk about much more broadly, keeping in mind that we as an agency almost cut across all the science institutions in India. My next slide, if it allows me to move. Yeah. So it's customary for us here in Australia to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are joining from. So I'm joining you from Geelong, near Melbourne, which is the land of the Wadrum community, and I pay my respect to their elders, past, present, emerging. So I also want to particularly name and acknowledge Judith, who is one of the board secretaries of the Wadrum Aboriginal Cooperative, which is celebrating 40 years this year. One of the things that brought us into the limelight was this acknowledgement from the journal Nature, which said that we were the first in the world to establish ferret model, so to show that ferrets are susceptible to SARS-CoV-2. This work was done back in late January and early February, and was funded by CEPI, and then they further funded us, and this is another one from our Dr. Jay at Bangalore, who wrote this piece on Nature India, on how we have now been selected further to evaluate the vaccines, leading vaccines, Oxford's vaccine, which is now licensed to AstraZeneca and is being manufactured at the Serum Institute. In addition to evaluating it as an injection, I also suggested that we should evaluate it intranasally to see whether it confers mucosal immunity. And we also evaluated Inovio's vaccine, which is similar to Zydus Cadila in terms of it being a DNA vaccine. And the other research which came out over the weekend, and I was in various telly, you might have seen in India Today and NDTV, Aaj Tak, etc. That the question here is that the vaccines were developed using the previous D strain sequences of the virus, which emerged from Wuhan, and subsequently the virus itself has evolved and become the dominant G strain, which is now present in 85% of the sequences globally and 82% from India. So the question then remains is, will the vaccine still work against the new dominant G strain? So my team led the first experimental evidence in this area to show that it actually will work, so it's good news. And it was also backed by computer modeling, which you can see in the screen. And these data have been shared with Oxford, AstraZeneca, etc., and will go into the regulatory package, which will inform the market authorization ultimately for some of these candidates. On the other, switching gears, we don't just evaluate vaccines, we also do fundamental research. So this is probably the first peer-reviewed paper in the world on how SARS-CoV-2 was evolving. We used not only phylogenetic approaches, but also novel alignment-free approaches in collaboration with our transformational bioinformatics team. And that then led nicely into a collaboration with India, with Dr. Vinod Skaria and others at the IGIB, so our counterpart agency at CSIR in Delhi. And one of the things that became very clear is it's no good. So you have roughly 1.5 lakh genome sequences of SARS-CoV-2 from around the world, publicly available, but you don't have any associated patient information. So you don't know whether the particular virus isolate was associated with a more severe disease. Is it because the patient had a comorbidity? Was the patient in a high-risk group, et cetera, et cetera? Did the patient survive? Did they die? What happened to them? We have no idea. So we defined, in collaboration with a large number of partners, including GISAID, which is the public database where in Germany and Singapore, where this whole data is being hosted. So we've now defined and set the standards of how to collect the patient metadata. And that's been published as well in that link. Again, the other thing, surveillance will become wastewater-based epidemiology, and surveillance will become very important as we, in a few years' time, move into eradication, or at least local eradication of the disease, to then have good monitoring. So this is another paper I was involved with, and it was actually led by Varish Ahmed, and it's published in Environmental Research. Hopefully, this gives you a flavor of the range of work, cutting-edge, world-class work we've been doing at CSIRO. We are a small country, 25 million people, but I think in science, we do punch above our weight, I believe. This is the other paper which I was involved in. It's an authoritative nature review of all the animal models. So you can see that there are different animal models. So there is the ferrets that we developed, but there is also non-human primates, particularly rhesus monkeys and mice and hamsters. Now, one of the big problems that I spoke to Dr. Renu Swarupji, and she was saying to me that the lack of animal models is holding back India in a big way, and we offered to share knowledge and expertise in that area if necessary. And possible areas of collaboration I see are with my own alma mater at the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, with Professor Raghavan Varadarajan and his spin-out company called Minvax on the immunogens that they have, which is pretty promising. We would like to collaborate, and we are in discussions on discovery as well as on clinical collaborations, which Dr. Shri Kumar mentioned. And then we talked about the animal model sharing. We also have been working with Vinod Skaria, as I mentioned on, this is, you can see on the top right, there is this logo of CSIRO and CSIR together. So this is a very good example of a joint venture where this is a single search engine for the whole world to look for specific sequences which have specific mutations of this virus. What are some of the barriers I have seen? If I can be a bit honest here, I think there is not enough translational research funding, particularly not available at the level of G2G institutes. And what I mean by that is CSIRO, as I mentioned, is equal to how many CSIR labs are there in India? 40 labs. Maybe ICMR has another 40 labs, and then Indian Council of Agricultural Research, another 20, 30. So, and so on and so forth. So if you count all the scientific labs in India, they will number something like well over 100. So CSIR, on the other hand, is a single agency. So many of the current research funding, for example, the India-Australia Strategic Research Fund, they give us 1 grant per year for entire CSIRO. And we have to go through an internal competition in order to be nominated to even compete for these grants. And it's a piddly little grant. It's like $1 million. And it's not enough to do the kind of work we want to do. And it's 1 a year. And a small, tiny university can get 1 grant, and the entire CSIRO gets 1 grant. So it's not a fair collaboration setup. And I used to be in the UK. I'm actually British, but permanently resident here. And we used to have the India-UK joint working group on health. And I used to be a member of it as an OCI myself. There is no equivalent group that I'm aware of. Maybe there is, but I'm not aware of. There is lack of, I use the word deep awareness. There is superficial awareness of each other's strengths, but there is not enough deep awareness of what's going on in each other's country. And the obsession of Australia, particularly led by very vocal university sector, which is clearly and obviously worried about loss of international student fees and what that means as a source of cross-subsidizing research. The entire conversation has somewhat been hijacked by that narrative. And we have not had the courage and candor to look beyond that. That is extremely important. It's a great source of what the Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji talks, living bridges between Australia and India. Students are extremely important and they are the future leaders. But we also have to look beyond that approach. And from Australian side, the agencies here have to look at India as a partnership of equals, not just as a market where we can do clinical trials for cheap or can go and do things. I think it has to come with a deep sense of respect and a deep sense of recognition of each other's strengths and being able to work together in a post-COVID world. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Professor Vasan. If you can take the presentation off, that's wonderful. Thank you. Okay. And our final speaker for this session is Mr. Vijay Vijayragam. He's the chairman and CEO of Satguru Management Consultants, who has been engaged in technology management services with over 25 countries in exploring the potential of applying technological innovations in life sciences. He has been on the advisory board of 6 global incubation centers that have graduated over 100 ventures in the USA and in Asia. Over to you, Vijay.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think substantial ground has been covered by learned speakers so far. Let me focus on a few of the elements, that are pertinent for the Australian opportunity. One, of course, is what are our priorities in India today? I mean, in terms of pharmaceutical targets. In the bacterial pathogen area, I think tuberculosis is still single most infectious disease that we need to look at. And of course, we do generate almost 2.9 million new cases every year. And that's a kind of concern for us. So I think that's something where Australia has been investing and is potentially an opportunity for us to explore that and bring in new high potency vaccine candidates, as well as address the drug resistance tuberculosis challenge today. The other big element, of course, that Sri Kumar talked about in the biologics realm, I think that's another area where we are increasingly moving into creating tremendous amount of repository of knowledge today, and of course the NCDs, is of significant interest to us as we emerge to be one of the leading lifestyle disease regions today. We do have a strong chemical pharma portfolio of varied therapies, but moving into biologicals and small molecules as such, I think we have potential to penetrate the markets in a much higher potency. That's where, of course, we see significant interest of API leaders today moving into the biologic segment. We have just about a dozen promising candidates within the country, but I think significantly engaging in licensing, because Australia is one of the major destinations there. That's an area that we see as a great potential for us. In areas such as autoimmune, cancer immunotherapy, I think our investment in research is significantly surging, and a lot of it today is globally partnered initiatives today. The fourth area I see is the animal health area. We have serious threat of zoonotic diseases in the country. India is world's largest cattle population and also small ruminants as well. So our focus on animal health vaccines and animal therapeutic products has never been as high as what it is today. And that's the attention of several pharma companies today. And I would see that next 10 years, we will surge very, very expeditiously to get our animals remaining healthy. What are the opportunities that exist for Australian biotech sector in India? I would say in each of these 4 segments, certainly there is tremendous potential. In the infectious disease segment, Dr. Vasan very elucidly articulated the excellent work going on there. I think with travel-bound diseases, I think we have tremendous opportunity to look at developing common products there. In the biologics realm, I would say Australian government has taken a lot more proactive pro-substitution approach to biosimilars. Australia's pharmaceutical benefit scheme has listed almost 86 originator biologics, with 17 of them having one or more biosimilar brands today. That's excellent, I would say, and one of the leading countries that have excelled in this area. The Australian TGA, of course, you all know, has adopted a very robust regulatory pathway for recognizing biosimilars with transparent clinical validation process. And that's another good model. I think as India is evolving these models, I think we have a tremendous opportunity to co-learn from what is accomplished in Australia. But it's given a lot of impetus to biologics, which includes the range of products, antibodies, antigens, nucleotide-based therapeutic and enzymes. 43% of the patent generated in Australia come from the segment, which is very unique. World over, this is a minor segment, basically constituting anywhere 20 to 30%. But Australia is the highest level of patent filing in terms of small molecule inventions are concerned. And that's a big strength that India can, depend on today. In the area of animal health again, basically I think we are one of the leaders in the world. that we see your cattle health focused, pharmaceutical products as well as therapeutic applications. You are one of the leaders, and we would like to see more Australian companies, that can really support us in this area. The other thing I see is that if you look at some of the veterinary companies that are very strong, like Murray Burn Cooperative or Agriculture Victoria, or even one of the companies I admire, came out of Australia, or Lauda Pharma. None of them are there in India today. These are leaders in animal healthcare products today, and we have the largest ruminants in this country. So I think these are ready to go innovations that we can adopt quite expeditiously. We talked about Australian companies accessing Indian markets, and certainly it's a major attraction. But even large Australian players such as CSL, which almost constitutes 2/3 of your revenue in Australia, with strong presence in plasma therapy, vaccines, or companies like Novagen, we don't see any dominant presence of these leaders in India today, which is a tremendous opportunity for co-creating, not just new products, but also to take some of these, opportunities they have to global scale production that India can certainly do. Dr. Vasan talked about translational research partnership. It's an area we never explored. We've done tremendous amount of translational research partnership in agriculture between Australia and India. Your transgenic banana project and several others, beet, because we have tremendous partnership. But in healthcare, somehow we're not gone into, though you have tremendous amount of validation models with you. The other opportunity I see is that Australia is in the forefront of investing in upstream research from the federal system. You are $150 to $180 million a year, is as much as 2/3 of what India invests today, for the kind of population we have. And you rank among the top 10 innovation centers in the world in terms of life sciences excellence and research. It can be extremely synergic what we do in India, in terms of community healthcare delivery beyond drug discovery into models that you have excelled very well. So that's another area for us to really look at. One of the things I see is that Australia generates a lot more public research patents. Today it's almost like CSIR. Of course, we have the leader there, but almost 40% of the Australian patents come from nine best institutions. So going from CSIR all the way to Queensland, Sydney, Monash, Wehi, all of these, we have a very, very, very limited touch points that converge with Indian research today. I think that's tremendous area we have, for us, and to look at, the spin-outs these are created. Australia excels today, as much as what I see in Cambridge. You have very vibrant institutions spill out today. 4 running companies like MedVet Science, Bionomics, Biota Scientific, and even spin-outs that CSIR was created. These are tremendous models that we should learn from today, and see why couldn't we do that today. We have embryonic situation of spin-outs. But Australia has done so well on account of very transparent policy and a risk-based funding system that has made it possible. I look at these models to be far better than what we see in France or UK today in terms of models that are agile and approachable and assembled in terms of institutional support. 20+ life science accelerators. You people started acceleration in the academic systems about 8 to 10 years ahead of India. That's a reality. So you have a lot of lessons that we can pick from you. And several of them are synergic to, you have, of course, 200 odd startups that are vibrant. We have 2,000 odd startups that Sri Kumar talked about. I think we have models that we can learn from you, how you made it successful, with your funding ecosystem, as well as very transparent academic tech transfer to these spin-outs that have come out. I still admire lots of companies, Vigenix, Star Pharma, Alchemia. These are all great companies, but none of them have footprint in India. They all come to United States and Europe to go for validation. They want to list in NASDAQ, but I think this is where, opportunity is for us to look at how we can collaborate. So university partnerships, tremendous amount of licensing options that Mr. Jain talked about. institutional learning in terms of what you've done in academic ecosystem to spur innovation. I think these are tremendous areas, and if that's combined with life sciences education that you excel today in partnering, I think we have a very, very Indo-Pacific model, that we can demonstrate as a very successful model. Thank you.
Vijay, thank you very much. A great presentation and taking into consideration the opportunities between India and Australia. I would like to get on to the questions as quickly as possible. We've got a few minutes left. We'll start off with Umesh Goel. Umesh has asked, what's the strategy of Indian pharma companies to increase its market share in Australia? Mr. Jain, maybe you can answer this one.
So thank you very much. In fact, there are companies, I've been having discussions with them. They will like to increase the product range which is being marketed in Australia. So we have got branded generics, we have got complex generics, we will have biosimilars getting into Australia. So that will be a great opportunity, and we will like to work together with the Australian companies. So at the moment, we have got around 4 to 5 companies. We will increase the participation by other companies. We've got 25 members in the IPA itself. So there is a tremendous opportunity, and we can make economic difference to the healthcare system. Like say, just to give the example, 40% of branded generic sales in US is from India. Why our share should not increase as far as the Indian market is concerned? So we like to present our thing, and the regulatory system perhaps should help, because whatever is approved in say US approved plants should be allowed in Australia. So that will expedite the entry of Indian products to Australia. I will stop here.
Question from Rajiv Dubey. What will it take for Australian research institutes to connect with the Indian private sector? Maybe Vijay, you might want to have a go at this.
Sure, I think we need to create more convergences, between two ends. Invariably, I think we tend to converge in US and bio between Australia and Indian pavilions. Rather we need to have direct connectivity created and make sure that we have opportunities for the Indian private sector. When we get into Australian institutions, they're extremely agile, extremely cooperative, very transaction driven. And that really is amazingly spectacular, I would say, in terms of efficiency. But the knowledge or outreach is so limited today on what wonderful science is going on in Australian system. Unless you're part of it, you're not aware of it today. I think that's what is needed there to have a better outreach, to have connecting. I think that's where Newland Global kind of, entities can create those opportunities. And of course, the Consul General, Honorable Consul General, talked about a facilitative framework where we can really have private sector to understand some of the cutting edge translational work going on there, and see the research results, the relevance to India, and adapt it here. I think it just needs more connectivity. We find that Australian early stage companies, mid stage companies are great, but their outreach is very limited. That obviously happens because there is a limited market there. I think that facilitation will be critical for enlarging this opportunity.
Thank you, Vijay. A couple more questions. Investment remains a key area of concern for the biotech sector. What sort of narrative is required to attract more investments, and what can both countries do together? Shri, maybe to you this one.
So it's actually the investment in the biotech sector. It's a matter of actually getting to know what the complementary sectors are. And one of the well-known facts about India, and I'm just not being, is there is a lower cost of failure. So let me explain this more. We all know that India does represent cost arbitrage. But it's the cost arbitrage when it's converted to value arbitrage that becomes actually really important in innovation. Because in innovation, the risk of failure is very high. So when you have a situation where you need to try out 5 ideas, but you have money only for 2, then it's a little bit of a toss-up, because you may not be able to pursue all 5 ideas, because unless you pursue it, you don't get to know which one is actually worth placing a bet on. Here is where a cost arbitrage can become a value arbitrage, where you can afford to take 5 bets for the same amount of money, and then you can see which one of those actually go forward. And this is a model that has to be practiced much more, okay? So that's the reason India and the US partnerships, they go so much further in terms of contract research opportunities, because people can afford to take far more bets in innovation. And you will find that India has a rule of law, respect for intellectual property. It's a well-proven model, okay? And I would strongly urge that, you know, companies in Australia invest in India through partnerships or through their own subsidiaries. Foreign direct investment is very easy. Go ahead, do more innovation in India, okay?
And just
Money to add to that.
Sure, please, Vijay.
You know, one of the opportunities I see is Australia is one of the strongest investors with your, you know, long-term pension funds and sovereign money into life sciences today. You know, because all of our life science endeavor, from discovery to markets, is a long-term investment today, and that's the real challenge we have in India. If Australia can move, you know, even a small fraction of that sovereign funds into this big opportunity in India, we need $17 to $20 billion in just creating biological assets in this country today. And these are fantastic assets to look at for investment. I think that's something we need to turn the direction of folks there and see how they can, you know, pay attention to this opportunity emerging in the country here.
Yeah, if I may add, because the innovation is such that you can go and invest in some other economy, let's say the Europe or whatever else. But not only is the cost of innovation lower, if it's innovation locally, then there is also a much larger market. So rule of law, protection of intellectual property, ease of, you know, collaboration, especially research collaboration, requires language, requires exchange of ideas. These are just made to order for a collaboration between Australia and India. So I strongly echo this thing of pension funds, a small fraction, which they always dedicate for high risk investments. It'll go a very, very long way.
Yes, the super funds are being courted aggressively at the moment. We're working very closely with a number of them in regards to investing in India. It takes a little bit longer with the Australian super funds. They're very conservative, as is the financial institutions in Australia. But Mr. Gupta can sort of talk to us about exactly what the super funds are doing and how the Indian government and Indian businesses are, you know, communicating the opportunities in India. Would you like to have a say on that, Mr. Gupta?
You know, both the governments, it's not only the government of India, but also the government of Australia, we are working together with the super funds. As you know, super funds obviously would like to look for assets which are less risky, which are predictable. And to begin with, you know, the super funds are collaborating more through the institutions like the NIIF, because that provides, you know, the funding models, you know, which provide them the degree of confidence that they look forward to. Because and last year, Australian Super already decided to invest close to $1 billion through the NIIF. And last week also, you know, a couple of super funds were there in discussions with NIIF further. So there is an opportunity, but as Deepen is saying, it's going to take some time. But maybe since most of you are veterans and eminent veterans in the industry, in the pharma and biological space, is it possible that you can provide, you know, a list of companies, you know, which you feel, you know, they provide them the scale and confidence that they look forward to? Because from the Australian perspective, what is needed is the company reliable? Is the company predictable? are the investment practices, are as the standards they look forward to. So this is something, if the industry is self-regulated or the bodies, have something, that we can certainly share with the super funds, and further, these discussions can be moved forward. Because here the super fund industry also we need to understand is largely driven by the private sector. The Australian government does not have much role to play in that.
Right. May I add a comment?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mr. Gupta, this is a very valid observation that the super funds would like to invest in predictable, low-risk returns. But what we have seen in the United States, for example, pension funds, where 95% of the funds or 98% of the funds go into predictable assets, 1 or 2% are put into high risk, high growth assets. And that's all we're looking for. So and I think that's a very sound strategy. If you have an occasion, Mr. Gupta, if you could have a chance to influence it, because India is looking strongly at innovation. And perhaps even companies like the LIC or whatever else, if you're having a collaboration, even they put aside a very small percentage of their funds through the, like for example, the Tata Capital Innovation Fund. So, and it gives it big alpha if it succeeds. It fits the national strategy in terms of spurring innovation, gives a flexibility that government cannot provide otherwise, in terms of, but the downsides are also well protected, because if it goes, it's just a 1%, it's not a very large fund, but these are very important. And this is a strategy many people follow. So I think we need to, you certainly have a chance to influence the thought process. So if you could just put in these kind of ideas that, very small percentage by mandate should go into driving innovation, okay, or innovative, that would be a very nice thing.
Thank you very much. I might close the session. We've gone a little bit over time, but my gathering from this session is very much that India is open for business. It's open for cooperation. It's open for R&D, clinical trials, and open for working together with Australia in the areas of pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, healthcare, and life sciences. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Manish Gupta and CGI for their support. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Sudarshan Jain and the Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance for their support. I'd like to thank Mr. Sri Kumar Suryanarayan for the support of ABLE. Mr. Vijay Vijayragam, thank you very much for your informative talk. And of course, from Australia here, Professor S.S. Vasan, really appreciate you talking about the work that you're doing here with CSIRO. And thanks everyone for joining in today. We will put this recording on to our platforms very soon. Have a lovely day in India and a lovely afternoon in Australia. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.